The concrete mixer's engine roared as it backed into my yard, drowning out Karen's screams from across the fence. She was shrieking something about her children's rights, but I knew the truth. She had no idea that when the police sirens came screaming down Maple Street later that day, it wouldn't be me they were hauling away. It would be her. It all started months earlier, when I thought I had finally found peace in my little suburban dream. I worked long hours as a software engineer, saved every dime, and spent my weekends building the pool in my backyard with my own 2 hands. That pool was supposed to be my sanctuary, the one reward for years of grinding away. But the moment Karen and her family moved in next door, my sanctuary turned into a nightmare. The first time I saw her kids in my pool, I thought maybe it was an honest mistake. 2 blonde heads bobbing in the water at 7 in the morning, their laughter echoing across the fence. I stepped outside, coffee in hand, and before I could even say a word, Karen came strutting across her lawn in a bathrobe, waving like she was queen of the block. "Oh, don't be dramatic, David," she said, rolling her eyes. "They're just kids having fun." Just kids having fun. That's what she called it. But when just kids leave muddy footprints on my deck, crack one of my planters, and toss candy wrappers into my pool, it stops being fun. And when their mother acts like my backyard is her family's personal water park, it stops being tolerable. I told her to keep them out again and again. She laughed every time, as if property rights were optional, as if boundaries were negotiable. One morning, something inside me snapped. I told her point blank, "If I see your kids in my pool again, I'm calling the police. I'm calling my lawyer." She smirked like I'd just told her the punchline to a bad joke. "You'd really call the cops on children?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake pity. I looked her dead in the eyes. "I'll call the cops on anyone who trespasses on my property after being told to stop." She didn't flinch. She just pulled her kids through the fence, a gap they had clearly carved out to make their little trips easier, and muttered loudly enough for the whole block to hear, "Some people just don't understand community responsibility." Community responsibility. That phrase echoed in my head as I looked at the muddy mess she left behind, the broken planter, the wrappers floating in the shallow end. That's when I picked up the phone and made a decision that would change everything. Yeah, I told the contractor, I need a full pool removal. Tomorrow morning. The next day at 7 a.m., sharp, heavy machinery rolled into my driveway. The ground shook as the excavator positioned itself, and the concrete truck gleamed in the sunlight like a weapon. Within minutes, neighbors were peeking out their windows, stepping outside, whispering to each other. Karen, of course, came storming over in yesterday's clothes, eyes wild from whatever schemes she had been plotting all night. "You cannot be serious," she screamed at me. "You're destroying a perfectly good pool just to spite my children." I sipped my coffee. What I do on my property is my business. As the machines roared to life, her voice was drowned out, but not her fury. She tried everything, begging, threatening, even calling city offices and the mayor's hotline while the excavator tore apart the pool shell. She shouted about community standards while neighbors muttered back about trespassing. Evidence piled up against her, her kids' goggles, their water bottles, their toys at the bottom of my pool. She grew redder, angrier, more desperate. And then came the harassment. A bogus city citation taped to my door claiming I started construction before permitted hours. A letter from her husband dusting off his old law degree, threatening litigation with laughable jargon. My mail tampered with packages, redirected, even Child Protective Services knocking at my door after someone reported that I was aggressively confronting minors. Every single time I had to prove myself innocent. Every single time she tried to paint me as the villain. That's when I hit the lowest point. I sat in my kitchen staring at the growing pile of accusations and thought maybe I had gone too far. Maybe destroying the pool was petty. Maybe I was the selfish man she kept telling everyone I was. For a moment, I almost believed her version of reality. But then CPS walked through my backyard, saw the safety barriers, watched my security footage, and shook their heads. The officer who came about her false police report told me flat out, "Mr. Chen, this is one of the clearest cases of harassment I've seen. She's filing false reports. That's a crime." That was my turning point. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't wrong. I was being targeted, and I had every piece of evidence I needed to fight back. The final showdown came on the morning the concrete truck arrived to finish the job. as gray cement poured like lava into the pit where my pool used to be. Karen finally snapped. She climbed my fence in her pajamas, barefoot, screaming at the top of her lungs. She grabbed a shovel from my shed and started flinging wet concrete everywhere, trying to save the pool. She smashed my patio table, tore my umbrella, destroyed my grill, all while screaming nonsense about children's mental health and community rights. Neighbors came running with their phones out, recording every second. Marcus from across the street shouted at her to stop. Mrs. Patterson shook her head in disbelief. Kids pressed their faces against windows, watching their mother unravel. And then Karen pulled out her phone and made the worst mistake of her life. She called 911. Her voice rang out hysterical. "There's a man destroying community property. He's threatening children. He's violent and aggressive. Send someone immediately." But she didn't realize every neighbor around us had their cameras pointed at her. The police weren't coming to save her this time, they were coming to see her. When the cruisers turned onto Maple Street, her face drained of color. She dropped the shovel, tried to scramble back over the fence, slipped and fell face first into the mud and broken furniture. Sirens wailed as officers stepped into my yard, and there she was, covered in concrete hair, wild pajamas torn, trying to spin her same old story. "Officer, thank God you're here, he's terrorizing us." Enough, the deputy cut her off. "You're trespassing, you've damaged property, and you just made a false 911 call. We have the evidence." I showed them the footage. Marcus showed them his. Mrs. Patterson waved her phone from her porch. Every lie she tried to tell crumbled under the weight of proof. The officer read her rights as they cuffed her, and I watched the woman who had tormented me for months shrink into something pitiful. Her children cried from their window as their mother, once so certain of her power, was shoved into the back of a police car. And that's where it ended. Not with me celebrating, not with the neighborhood cheering, but with Karen Morrison sitting in the back of that cruiser, her delusions shattered, her reign of harassment finally over. Some battles you don't win with fists or fury, you win with patience, evidence, and the truth.